Hey there, welcome to my tutorial on how to whittle a spoon. So I made this because if you're a member of Galgael, you've got the option to get a kit that's going to be sent out in the post that's going to give you all the tools you need to whittle. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, just give me a message. And yeah, I apologise, it's a very shoddily made video, but yeah, hope you enjoy it anyway. And yeah, cheers. So first off, I'm gonna have to take off the bark of this log. Now I'm gonna have to split it. You can see it's already got some splits in the wood. So I'm gonna work with those splits to try and find a good amount of wood that I can work with to make a spoon. Or two, hopefully. Probably can use both of these. They've still got some splits in the top, so I'm going to have to try and cut away until there's none of that left. And we'll see what we're left with. So I've just discovered a knot, which can look really nice, but also it's more difficult to and more unpredictable when you're carving, because it might just break away. But I'll leave that there at the head of the spoon. So as this side's a bit bigger. Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, not too bad.
More spoons.
Yeah, I'm actually making a tutorial now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Or right now? Oh, fine.
Oh, no, it's fine. I'm going to edit it all anyway afterwards. But, yeah. So that's pretty much all the splits carved out. There's just one here, but I can see where it goes to. And so I'm just going to draw there, that's where I'm going to stop. And now I'm going to draw on the shape of the spoon. So it's going to be something like that. I don't stick that true to the drawing, it's more just a rough outline, mainly for not cutting off too much here. So if you're doing this with the craft kit, you're going to have to do that just with the whittling knife, and it's totally fine. It just takes a bit longer, so I'm going to use the axe first, just to quicken up the process. When I'm doing this, I put my hand a lot closer to the blade if I'm doing anything near my fingers, just so I have more control. And if I'm doing anything that requires a bit more, I don't know, if I need to be a bit more careful. But it's getting pretty close to the point where I'm just going to start working on with the knife. I just need to get rid of this chunk at the end here, because of that split, so I'm just going to do that. This would be a lot quicker with a saw, but I don't have a vise, and so it's actually a bit of a pain using a saw. Actually, it's just quicker to use the axe. That's good enough for now. I'm just going to take a bit more off the back.
Okay, so I'm going to start using my whittling knife now, which means I'm going to go upstairs back into the flat. See you in a second. Okay, so now moving on to using the knife. Now I'm going to wear gloves because I can't really see that, but I cut myself yesterday. It's really easy to do. It's like you may as well wear gloves, but it's also nice not wearing gloves, so that's up to you really. And as you see, mine aren't really that good anyway. So I'm just going to kind of work to the vague outline that I have and making sure to, as well as getting this shape, you want to think about the side-on shape. Like I'm going to go for a kind of curve down to where the head starts and then curve up, so that this is going to be a kind of like eating spoon, I guess, rather than a cooking wooden spoon. So it's nice if it has that curve so that it's easier to scoop things up. And I'm going to want to get rid of this because it's like softer wood at the very center. In terms of like how to actually do it, I don't really know what the best advice is other than just kind of do what feels right. Obviously being sensible in terms of cutting. If you're cutting towards yourself, then be careful, but it's still, I do that definitely quite a lot. Quite often I hold it against my chest to give it a bit of support, or kind of flick it off like that. The problem with that, doing it like that, is that the wood shavings go everywhere. So yeah, actually that's something to bear in mind, is do it somewhere that you can easily clean up. Yeah, I'm just going to get started and see how it goes. It kind of looks like there's a bit of maybe dry rot, something like that. So that's not ideal, but basically I'll just try and cut that away until it looks good. And there's also this knot here, which I'm probably just going to take off completely. But it's a bit more difficult to carve into a knot, but you can still do it. You have to be careful that your wood shavings don't get in your tea as well. That's a hazard. Drop my spoon. That happens every now and again. We're getting there. Still this kind of side-on shape that I was talking about. It's not looking great, so maybe I should work on that for a bit. If you wanted, you could just keep drawing on it as you're going, because obviously what happens is once you cut away the wood that the drawing's on, the drawing's not there anymore. And also I've not drawn on a shape on the side because I just tend to like kind of make it up as I go along. But if you want a specific shape, especially if you haven't done it before, then it's a good idea to draw it on, so you know like whether you're doing like a loop up round like that, or you're coming around that way. If you're going to make the handle sort of bigger at one end or in the middle, that's good to mark on, because otherwise you can just sort of forget what you're doing and whittle away the whole thing. I'm going to make mine sort of thicker at the end of the handle, so I'm just remembering to keep this bit wider and then taper in towards the head of the spoon. And also we have to bring it in quite a bit here, where the handle starts and the head ends. So I've just noticed that there's a crack at the end of the spoon. I don't know if you can see that. So if you get something like this, you can decide whether to just whittle away until it's not there anymore. Kind of take the handle down totally to that level, which is what I'm going to do. But you could also kind of make it into a feature by cutting in there and having like a different shaped end, or cutting just on one side and end up with a kind of lopsided handle, but it could look quite nice. That's just the kind of thing you can just decide as you're going along, if you get a crack like that. Also just realized that I should have been using this camera all along because it's much better definition. So sorry about that. When you're cutting off an end like, I don't know how close I am to the camera. If you're cutting off an end like that, you kind of have to whittle across like this, and then from that side, and you'll kind of make a little point, and you just slowly take that off. You have to be careful not to cut your thumb when you're doing that, which is why my glove has a hole in it there, because I've hit myself in the thumb so many times. Yeah, basically just slowly get it down. You see, you get a kind of curve like that. And it's turning into quite a good shape at this point. It's going to be quite a small spoon, but that's alright. So at this point, although the outer shape's still not perfect by any means, I'm going to start cutting away at the bowl. Just because I find it easier, like this whole bit needs to be brought down. But it's sometimes a bit tough to cut it when all of that's still there. So I'll go back to the straight knife. But for now, I'm going to go on to using the hook knife. When you're using the hook knife, the main thing you're going to be doing is cutting from the outside into the middle, across the grain, just like that. It's useful when you're using a hook knife, especially for the first time, to draw on where you're going to be cutting the bowl, just like a couple of millimeters in from the edge. Maybe more if you still haven't finished trimming the outside. Something like that, just so that you don't overdo it and go too far to the edge. Starting to get a pretty decent bowl. You can cut along the grain with this. You just have to be more careful you don't take off too much. Sometimes you get a strip and it just come off all the way down and you'll take off the back of the spoon. So you just have to be careful. But sometimes there's no other way to get in, like at the top, you kind of need to get in going down the grain. Okay, so I just had some technical issues, but I'm back, and it's the next day, and if you do stop whittling for even half a day or a few hours, it's always best to put the wood in a plastic bag or damp newspaper, just because you don't want the wood to dry out too quickly, especially in like hot weather like it is at the moment, because it will crack. So sometimes you might see, if you've left your spoon for a while, some cracks have started to form and you might have to cut those out again. So yeah, I'm just going to pick up where I left off and keep going. So I've been whittling away and it's getting dangerously thin now, so I'm going to have to be careful of that. I find quite often it's easy to overdo this part for some reason, because you're cutting in from that side and in from that side. But also you do want it to be the thinnest part probably, but at the point where it starts getting bendy, obviously you've got to be careful. So I'm pretty much there now, but I'm just going to want to, so you can see, can you there? A few bits that are pretty rough. So I'm going to go over this with sandpaper. Like, it's kind of a thing in the greenwood carving, I don't know, circles, that you shouldn't use sandpaper and that you should just use a knife. Like, if your tools are sharp enough, you don't need sandpaper. But I don't think that really matters. I think it gives a good finish when you use sandpaper. So before I use the sandpaper, I'm going to be careful around these bits that are really rough
and try and make them as smooth as possible, just to save time, because sometimes you can spend ages sanding something otherwise. So I'm just going to go at it with a kind of medium grade sandpaper, and then if there's any bits that are really rough, like these bits, I might have to go over with something coarser. But I'm going to do the medium first, and then have a look at what the spoon looks like. I might need to do some cutting again up here actually for the bowl, so we'll see. So I've been over it with sandpaper and it's looking a lot better, but I don't know if you can see, there's still some pretty big grooves here, cut marks. So I'm going to go over it again with the knife really carefully. This bit, sometimes I can spend ages trying to get this right, because you have to try and cut away and then leave no mark. And sometimes you do it that side and you leave a bit of a mark. You do it from the other side and you leave a bit of a mark. You end up just taking off more and more and more. But the only other way to do it would be to go at it with a coarse sandpaper, which can get the job done, but then you might end up with no real sign of, like, no sort of whittling marks, which is one of the nice things about making a spoon with a knife like this, is it has those cut marks in it. So ideally you'd want to leave it so that you can still see those, but whichever method you prefer, and also, you know, maybe prefer the look of sandpaper. So it's pretty much ready now. I've used a finer grain of sandpaper, but before I oil it, I'm just going to wet it and then let it dry and sand it again, because when you wet it and let it dry, it just brings up the rougher parts, and you end up with a smoother finish at the end. Also, it allows you to see what it's going to look like when it's oiled, because when it's wet, that's basically what it's going to look like. And you can just see if there's any bits you're not happy with and just finish those up at the end. So that's it wetted. Probably doesn't look that different on this camera, but I can see now a few bits that I'm going to want to slightly redo. But first I'm just going to need to let it dry. It actually doesn't make as much difference wetting wood when it's this fresh. This is like very green wood. But if you're using like a dried wood, that would make quite a big difference. So I'm just going to leave it to dry now. Okay, so now that it's dry, I'm just going to give it a few finishing touches. Bring down some bits where I could see there was maybe a bit of a crack or anything like that, and just give it one more sand and then we're ready to oil. Okay, so that's that all sanded. So now all we need to do is put some oil on it. You can use basically any cooking oil, works fine. Olive oil, vegetable oil. If you have linseed oil, that's great, but basically it just needs to be something that's not toxic, obviously, because you're going to be putting it in your mouth. So I have this little oil bowl that I also whittled. Oops. I just use my fingers and just put a bit of oil on like that and just rub it on. You could use a cloth or some kitchen roll or something like that, but things work fine. And just leave it on some kitchen roll for a few hours to dry, and then put on maybe 2 more coats, and then it's ready to go. Here's some I made earlier. It's essentially the same principle. You can make any of these spoons now. Obviously makes a big difference what kind of wood you're using. Some woods that look a lot nicer are kind of harder to whittle. But yeah, just go for it and enjoy.